So, Charlene, BizWorld Camp with US Bank was just a couple of weeks ago, huh?
Yep,
Wonderful. So I'm
it was
excited to
our
hear a little bit more. Yeah.
ninth ninth camp, I think, with US
Wow.
Bank.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's
9 years.
great. 9 years. Was US Bank the first corporate you guys ever did a camp like this with?
No, no.
No, it wasn't. Okay.
No, I mean that would have been way before my time. So I've been with Israel
Sure.
13 years.
Yeah.
Um, but it is our longest standing camp partnership.
Longest standing camp partnership. How do you think, right off the bat, how do you think like the BizWorld camp in like a corporate environment differs from BizWorld in like a classroom type environment?
Well, it's much different. Even with the so post COVID, we do the US Bank camp a little bit different because we do um part of it at the campus where it used to always be at the US Bank location.
Mhm.
So that was always a big one is like you're taking the kids out of their classroom onto a corporate campus. So we still
Sure.
do that. We do that for day one, but the second day is in their classroom.
Okay.
But it's different. I mean, it's not their classroom teacher teaching the class, and it's like volunteers from US Bank are there working with them. It's not like their typical day in the classroom,
Yeah.
where usually when it's implemented by a classroom teacher, it's like, they'll spend an hour a day over a few weeks, or they'll do like we do a couple just solid days, but it's still their teacher, which is great, you know, um,
Of course.
but it's definitely different for them. And the biggest thing is having the US Bank employees come in as their company advisors. So they have like a dedicated person working with them um, to run their business and advise them. And that's the big thing that, the bank loves is because their employees love to do that. They really have like a hands-on experience with these young people. And it's way more in depth than a lot of the things that they get to do as employee engagement opportunities. They're passing out lunches or things like that. And a lot of the times when they're doing employee engagement opportunities, I mean, they're spending a lot of quality time with these young people and making a real impact on their
Great.
lives.
That's wonderful. So it's different, like, because they're actually, like you said, getting to spend real quality time, make a big impact, different than just passing out lunches, right? Actually get to advise and think through and participate with the students, huh?
Yeah, or just, I mean, we do have speakers who come in and speak and present to the kiddos as well, but you know, again, like a lot of times that's all they get to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you hope that your story has impacted these young people, and a lot of times, yes, it does. I definitely see them engaging in some of the professionals that come in to tell their story. Um, but that's still not as like engaging as the opportunity to spend 8 hours with young people helping them advise how to run their companies, you
Yeah.
know?
I love it. I love it. Where did the camp happen this year? Where's US Bank's office located?
So I mean, US Bank is all across the country, but or
Of
well,
course.
West Coast, but this happens in their Orange County
Hmm.
district. So we work with a school in Santa Ana, um, that is a partner with US Bank through their partnership with Templo Carvalho, which is like a church group. So they sponsor this um, school that's in Santa Ana. And that's the same school that we've worked with for the 9 years. It's wonderful. Edward B.
Wonderful.
Cole Academy, an amazing group of young people. It's a very small campus. It's literally like a city, like just a little in a residential area, just like a little block of
Huh.
like portables. But they have such a great environment there for the people. The teachers
Wonderful.
are amazing, the staff's amazing. So we always have a
Nice.
great time working with that school.
That's great. About how many students were involved in the camp?
This year was 64, I want to say. It's about that. It's, mid 50s, into the 60s. I think this is one of the largest groups that we've had. but it's yeah, we split them into two classes, and we have two instructors go, and each classroom has about 5 teams.
Love it. So you guys did two classes this year. Yeah, I mean, what record breaking, seemingly about 64 students split into two teams. Great. I mean, so I know this is kind of a basic question, but for people that aren't super familiar with biz world and then specifically these corporate
Mhm.
camps, right? What is sort of the benefit? Let's say what's the benefit of the camp versus maybe the in-school program? You can tell us just overarching benefits
Yeah,
also, but I'm curious
I
if there's
mean,
a difference.
yeah, there's, when you're implementing in your own classroom, there are some aspects that give you a little bit more time to spend on the materials. So we do an accelerated version for the camp. So we place them into job positions, and group them into companies, and from there on out, they make all their own decisions. When you're implementing in the classroom, there's more opportunities for lessoning around, like there's resume building and interviewing for jobs, and they get to kind of decide what path they want to go and apply for a job and things like that. In an accelerated version, when we only have 2 days, we have, less than 16 hours with breaks.
Sure, sure.
Um, there's a give and take. So that is there's that aspect that you lose a little bit that when you do in the classroom. But what you gain is just this amazing involvement by outside professionals that they wouldn't typically interact with, and that they get out of their school environment and they get to go onto a corporate campus, right? I mean, which, those of us who work day in and day out, it's there's, an office space isn't the most like exciting thing in the world. But when you've never actually seen like behind the doors at a bank where everyone works
Sure,
and
sure.
there's all these working professionals around and these fancy conference rooms, I mean, that's pretty cool. It's something
Yeah,
that we don't really think about children wanting to see. Like they actually do want to see where professionals work, their parents work potentially, right?
yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And just getting them exposed to something that they wouldn't normally do in their own classroom. And then, of course, having the professionals from US Bank come in, be company advisors, working as, VCs or bankers and, guest speakers, things like that. So those are all aspects that, while in a classroom, you could create that by tapping into your, parent base, community base. It is like a given in one of these corporate camps that we run.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I try and think back, like if when I was, a young student as well. What was the age group, by the way, of the students?
This is fifth grade,
Fifth grade. Yeah, in
so
fifth grade,
that's
right? Getting to see behind
11.
the doors,
Yeah.
an 11-year-old fifth grade behind the doors of a huge corporation, is definitely
Yeah.
exciting, right? Getting to get off of the
Yeah.
school environment for sure.
Yeah, even
Uh,
I mean there's a small bank branch at the US Bank offices. I mean, I know we used to teach at a different place and there was like a huge vault door and like the whole
of
nine. They were a little sad because it's like let's go look at the bank vault, and it was,
course.
a giant safe basically,
Sure, sure.
behind just a normal door. And like it had, lots of cameras and security and the whole bit, but they're like, where's all the gold? I mean, so just kind of reality check a little bit too. Like it's not all, money bags everywhere and
Of course.
piles of gold.
Yeah, not like the
Um,
movies. Yeah,
yeah,
that
exactly.
is that is pretty funny. So, it is now going into financial literacy month, right? And BizWorld
Mhm.
focuses a lot on financial literacy and then working with US Bank specifically also. Tell us a little bit about like what are the specific financial literacy skills that students learn throughout BizWorld Pro, BizWorld Plus program, and then, with the US Bank camp also.
Yeah, in BizWorld, while they're doing business finances, they're getting a real feel for what it means to like spend money and the impact that has on not only your bank account, but the end position of your company's finances. And so it's not personal financial literacy. And we do talk a little bit about that because they're paying, it's very similar to your own personal bank account.
Sure, sure.
But they feel a little bit like when it's their company's money, I mean, I almost feel like they have a little bit more risk. Like they're willing to take that risk because it's not their personal money, right?
Sure, sure.
And that's part of what we want them to do. We want them to have the experience of maybe they spent too much or maybe they didn't spend enough for like what it feels like to spend that money. So all the while throughout the programming, they're raising capital, they're having to make decisions on how they're gonna, make their products, how much they need to spend on their marketing, all that kind of stuff. And it's not till the end where we value their companies that they're like, oh, okay, I see how all this works. Because even I mean, throughout the whole program, they're balancing their ledger and doing financial worksheets and like they kind of see that, but at the end when they really see like did they have a profit or loss and like how much do they have to share with the VC, they get to really reflect back on how those decisions led to that. And to me that's the big thing that like we teach as part of financial literacy is a true understanding of how the give and take of expenses and revenue coming in. It is truly a productive failure activity. They're at the end, they're really seeing a result and they're able to look back at like what they did and they understand it more because they actually did it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not just an exercise on paper.
Not actually just an exercise on paper. They are physically taking the actions. It's cool to hear that, like you said, at the way end of the program, when
Mhm.
they're seeing their balance sheets, their profit loss, when their companies are being evaluated, and they can relate and correlate it all back to, okay, wow, what could we have done differently? Or because of those actions, decisions we made equal this end result, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I throughout the program there, it's intentionally designed that they'll run out of money a few times, so they have to raise more capital.
Mhm.
Um, but there's those moments, and they're like, oh no, now we have no money left. Like
Sure.
I thought that 40 biz bucks we got from the VC was like the most amazing thing, and we were like set, you know.
Mm,
And
mm.
then it's like, oh wait, I didn't like think about the fact that there's all these other things we need to pay for.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's so interesting. Are there any like I'm curious if there's like any stories where when students realize, oh man, they're running out of money and they have to re-raise, is there like panic moments or are there moments where like you see like kids really shine as far as like it's okay, like we can get more money, we can make this. Anything that like sort of comes to mind from the camp, maybe?
I mean, there was definitely multiple instances of that. That's just
Sure.
like a natural part of it.
Yeah.
Um, I, this happens every time I teach. This is generally a gist of it, right? Is they're super excited, they raise all this money, and then they're after their like first round of funding, they do a little prototyping, but they get to go and buy the materials they need to make their products with, and it's like
Mm.
let's spend money, and they just like they buy a bunch of stuff. And so you always overhear these conversations of like, well, we need more money. We should go pitch for more money, or no, we have enough things. Like let's not buy. And it's interesting to see the dynamics in the groups of um which ones are just like, yes, let's buy all the things, and which ones are having the conversations of like, do we need that?
Yeah.
And generally uh it's not surprising that the companies that go crazy tend to have a fairly high expenses at the end. So
Uh-huh.
unless their product did like gangbusters, they're like, they tend not to be the winning group.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
this particular round, we had there's a variety of supplies, and we have
Sure.
these bookmarks. So there's plain paper, and they can buy just plain construction paper for super cheap, and they could cut their own bookmarks, right? But then we have pre-cut bookmarks, and we had gotten these ones that had these like little tassels on them. So we were selling pre-cut fancy bookmarks and then like fancy tassels where again they could just buy string and make tassels for the
Sure,
bookmarks.
sure.
But this one group decided to like uber invest in fancy tassels, like
Yeah.
a whole lot. But they made keychains, and key rings also aren't, they're not super expensive, but they're not extremely cheap. And so they had a very high product. Like the cost to make their product was high. And at the end they felt that. They really
Really.
felt that. And they were like, well, maybe we didn't need all those fancy tassels because they bought like 27 fancy tassels and they were like $1 a piece. So
Yeah.
they're a biz buck a piece. So
Sure.
yeah, they
Sure.
felt that. But hey, when I'm at the store and they're buying things, I'm like, oh, that's a lot of tassels, you
Uh,
know? But I don't keep them from buying them. I mean, that's their decision to make, you know?
of course.
And that's the direction also that we give the company advisors, the bank employees or the corporate
Sure.
employees volunteering is um you want to keep them from making those bad decisions, but don't. Advise
Sure.
them, ask them questions, have them contemplate it a little bit. So really just parrot it back as a question, right? But don't tell them, no, you can't do that. At the end of the day, if they want to spend that money, then they can do that. And they're just going to see the consequence of that at the end.
Interesting. Yeah, that must be a fine line to play of how much to advise and ask the questions and help them think through decisions and not tell them what to do and what not to do
Mhm.
so that
It's hard
they
and
can learn. Yeah.
it's not a exact science, right?
Yeah.
It's same, excuse me, same with the VCs that we have, like the young people go and the kids go and pitch for funding. We
Mhm.
practice and we talk about like you start with you ask high, you can negotiate down if
Mhm.
they're not going to
Mhm.
give it to you. But sometimes they just get nervous and they go in and they're just like, we want to give you 4 shares for 10 biz bucks, which is like
Oh,
10 even for 1 share is pretty low.
okay.
And the VCs kind of like it's hard to say, okay, when you know that you shouldn't do that, because we give them some guidelines of how much they should be paying for each share. And a lot of times I tell them if it's really a bad deal, like be kind. These
Yeah.
are kids, but to an extent, like they gotta learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow, that is so funny. Yeah. It's like you venture capitalists can't just outright just be like, well, thank you for your offer. I would like to pay you way more for your
yeah,
company. Actually, yeah,
exactly. My
that's
price
so
to
funny.
that is I'll give you 20 biz bucks for 1 share, like
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of change that happens in the students from the beginning to the end. Uh, do you see I mean, the students like confidence change as well? Obviously, not just their financial understanding, but like how they're, yeah, like I said, like their confidence in themselves
Oh
even.
yeah. I mean, there's 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 always those kids that are shy or reserved, but are exceptionally smart and are paying attention. And I love it when I get to see them kind of activate. They're always a little shy, and the teacher knows, right? So
Mm,
in an
mm,
instance like a camp where we're relying on the classroom educator to help us give the kid a position that would kind of fit with their personality and group them in a way that's gonna kind of flow. Um, they might give them a role like CEO, and in the beginning you're like, well, kind of shy and reserved, but it's because they pay attention and they're listening and they like have that critical thinking skill to be able to be like, oh no, but you're good at this and let's do this and let's talk about this. Um, but they don't generally have a role like that in the classroom. There's not really an
Sure, sure.
opportunity for them to bring those skills to life. So I always love seeing that. Like it's the little CEOs that you think have these quiet, or they do have like a quiet personality. Um, Turns out that they're little superstars, and they like by the end they're really feeling confident in what they're saying, what their team's doing, getting up because they have to get up and pitch and do a commercial, and there's all these times where they kind of have to put themselves front and center.
Sure, sure.
Um, so I love that. It's also, there's the things like the talkative kid at the end really gets to show that he's a great salesman and go out and get people interested in coming to their booth and put his skills or her you to work, you know. There's kind of a role for everyone. So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. So they get to be these little superstars, right? It's
Mhm.
literally as we say, right? It's unleashing their inner superpowers.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's interesting also to hear they said a lot of times in classrooms, in a regular programming, not just in the classroom versus the camp, but in other programming or other curriculum, they don't have the opportunities to really shine like this or activate to those types of talents where they were a little bit of a shyer student in the classroom, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say like never ever. Like there's always
Sure.
teachers or other programs that um they can, but generally in like the Common Core type curriculum that we have to implement in schools, right, to teach them the basics so they can pass the
Mm,
test. Um, it's not giving them an opportunity to work on their selves and their personality and their skills, their passions, their superpowers, right?
yeah, yeah.
So in a program like BizWorld where they're very active and in, BizWorld traditional, it's all project based. It's intended for them to be doing the things and, yes, with some guidance, but they're the ones making the decisions, doing the things, and they're
Mm,
learning.
mm,
And they each have a leadership role, but they're also collaborating together at all times, right? Just because they're
oh,
doing
yeah.
marketing doesn't mean that only the VP of marketing is doing the marketing. No, they're
Oh,
leading the conversation, but everyone's participating in creating the marketing content.
yeah.
So it gives them a taste of a little bit of everything, just even if it's not their role, they still get to experience it. And it helps them determine like maybe they were the VP of finance because they are good at math, but what they really loved was the marketing section. Like they loved being
Yeah.
creative and thinking like, what can we, what type of commercial can we create to make people feel good things about our product, right? I mean, that's cool, you know?
That is great to actually hear that, right? They get to have a taste of everything, even if that wasn't their main role.
Yeah. And then that's the
So,
beauty of
yeah.
BizWorld
Yeah.
in the like classroom is, or
Mm,
in any implementation is it's designed to be, you know, cross across the curriculum. So they get
yeah.
a little bit taste of everything and it helps that real world understanding of how these skills are important
Mm,
life skills. It's
sure.
not just schoolwork, right?
No.
It's we're learning these things for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Learning them for a reason. Like I said, it's actually teaching those life skills, not just classwork. So
Yeah.
sort of along those lines, right? So these are fifth graders, right? Around 11 years old. It's young for a lot of people to think about. I'm curious, like what do you think the reasoning is, or yeah, why is it so critical to learn like financial literacy skills and business skills at such like a young age?
Well, you know, it's important, particularly in this day and age, right?
Mhm.
Kids have access to digital money earlier and earlier, right? I mean, I know, in my parent groups, right? Like their kids have Apple Pay on their phones or they have their own card that they load, but they have no idea of like what that money is. Like it's not the same as when your mom used to give you 20 bucks, and you knew that you had $20 in your hand and they would give you change when you bought a candy bar or something. Like kids think like kids are very tangible, right? So I think, it's really important this day and age when we're talking about money and financial literacy is that they really have an understanding of what it means to spend money, what are the outcomes of that, like what it means to earn money. And without that understanding of it, just like, oh, it's just like math, and money just comes in and I spend
Yeah.
it, and
Yeah.
then more money comes in. Like, like they need to kind of understand that like they work to get it. It comes in for a
Sure.
reason, and like then you
Sure.
got to spend it on things. You have to spend it on things, right?
Yeah.
So part of what they do in our programming is yes, they have to make decisions on how much of they're making bracelets and what kind of beads do we want to put on it and that kind of fun stuff about their products, but they also have to pay salaries and rent. And if they take out a bank loan, they have to pay an interest, so there's other costs that they have to spend that are just, sorry, you have to pay this.
Sure. Sure.
So I think that's what's important is just giving kids an opportunity to start to have that understanding young, because more and more we are putting that in their hands. And by the time they get to high school, as soon as you get into high school, you totally shift gears, right? It's like, okay, now you're going to college in 4 years. You have to make all these decisions about what it is the rest of your life is going to do, right? And like your career path is going to determine kind of your economic standing, right? Where you decide to go to college and how you pay for college is going to be a huge impact in your life. And we don't teach kids about that. And we don't do that in BizWorld, but at least we're giving them an understanding of cost and valuation, right? So we're hoping that when they get into high school and they're looking at that, they can really understand, well, if I'm taking out $100,000 loan, like, oh, loan, oh, I have to pay interest on that. Like, how
Yeah.
long is it going to take me to pay that back? Right? Like, is it going to be worth it in this career field? Like, they can have that base understanding of how money works so they can build and learn for themselves and hopefully have other opportunities to build upon that. So I just think that you know, it's never too young to really understand how like the value of money, and we don't need to burden kids with all of the adult things, but like having a basic understanding that things cost money and, and you have to work to get that money is going to make them more productive and more self-aware in the future. So, long answer.
I actually love that, especially there at the end, right? You say it's never too young to really understand the value of money, and they don't need to be burdened by all the adult things, but have this basic understanding will actually make them more productive and self-aware. You think
Yeah.
there's any gaps? This is a tough question. Feel free to even just say no.
Yeah.
But are there any gaps, or what gaps in like sort of traditional education does BizWorld fill when it comes to financial literacy?
I mean, there's lots of gaps, and there are states um and districts that are putting financial literacy in place as like a core value. But a lot of that is still, we have a dated education system. Like we're still teaching kids based on what we learned or what our parents learned years and years ago, right? So
Mm,
when we teach them how to balance a checkbook, like who has a checkbook anymore?
sure.
I mean, like, is the balancing aspect of that important? But getting them to understand that in a different lens, right? And I think that's why BizWorld's so applicable since it's not personal finances, it's business finances that they're looking at it, a company ledger. They are balancing, right? They are doing those
Yeah.
activities, but we're not
Yeah.
calling it a checkbook. So we're feeling, this gap that's like being more applicable. So,
Mm,
I say this all the time, but it doesn't matter what career path you choose, whether you're going to be a doctor or an artist or, an entrepreneur, business is going to be involved. And if you don't understand the business behind it, like, or at least the basic understanding that this is a business and that's how they make money and things like that, like, you're not going to do very well in that career
sure,
path.
sure.
Um, and people don't think about that a lot of times, like as an artist or as a doctor, but unfortunately, that is the reality, right? Like that is your
Yeah,
career and you have to be able to make money off of it, to take care of yourself. Um, so I think a lot of times, yeah, that's a hard question because I don't know,
of course.
every district is different. Even with state guidelines, a lot of districts, there's lots of issues in how, as a state, any, dictate what needs to be taught and what's available to schools to be taught. And the amount of
Mm-hmm.
time in between when they can change those curriculums is crazy. Like
Oh, really?
8 years is a very long time to refresh how we're teaching kids this day, right? If you think about
Oh, wow.
what's the value or what's the life of a computer these days? Like 4 years? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Well, you'd go through two computers before you were even allowed to change your curriculum as a school, right?
Wow.
I know, crazy. So, but what districts do is they supplement. They get, supplemental curriculum to teach them other things, but it really just depends on the district. How invested are they in creating more learning activities that are more 21st century minded? And that's a real flaw in our education system. And I'm sure other states have different year gaps. I don't know how it works specifically state by state. I
Sure,
happen to know
sure.
this just because I joined a council on my daughter's school, and we
Mm,
had a really poor reporting from teachers that they were satisfied with the curriculum they had available for math and science. And I'm like, oh, well, what are we going to do to change this? Oh, well, there's nothing we can do because we have 3 more years before the state will let us pick a new curriculum. I'm like, well,
wow.
how long in between? 8 years. Insane. Insane.
That is
So,
insane. Yeah, it's interesting. So different state by state, different district by district. And it really just depends on how quickly they want to change and update. But one interesting example you said, right? It's like sometimes we're still being taught things that kids are still being taught what we were taught or what our parents were taught. Balancing a checkbook is a perfect example. And so
mhm.
BizWorld fills a little bit of those more newer types of models of how to learn, especially when it comes to financial
But
education.
also, I mean, I would almost say like evergreen because like
Mm,
we teach things fairly basic in terms of business, right? There's always new nuances and new trends and all these things like we know in any industry, right? Um, but we're really simplifying it for young people, but it's, you know, yes, does a business have a checkbook? Sure. Does a bit, but what we're really looking is at the back end, the journal entries, we call it the company ledger, right? The accounting part of it. And we don't call it accounting because I don't think kids know accounting as much, but like you
sure.
tell a teacher now we're going to do accounting, they're probably going to be like, "Oh, I'm not an
Well,
accountant." you
of
know?
course.
And so we just say financials, oh, this is the
Sure.
company ledger and we're doing some financials and still feels a little daunting, but like the reality is they're doing accounting.
It's true.
Like,
That's very true.
you know,
Yeah, I like that. It was
and
just the basics, right? That more evergreen type
yeah.
content is interesting.
And it just the most important thing here is that like I feel like we teach kids, here's math. Okay, you gotta do these math. You gotta learn all these math things, algebra, blah blah blah. Or like, we're gonna do a report. You have to write a paper. Oh, you have to stand up and give the presentation on the paper. But why do we do any of this? Like, when am I ever gonna have to do this in real life? I mean, I'm never gonna have to write a paper as an adult. My mom doesn't write a paper and have to stand up and get. It's not true. You know, I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
depending what your career path is, you might actually have to write a paper, or you might have to get up and speak to a room full of people and tell them about something. You might have to make sure the math, you know? I mean,
yeah.
it's really like, but we don't really make those connections for young people in school of like why this is important and how you're going to use
Sure.
this and in a day to day, you know?
That's great. I love that, making those connections of why it's important, like the day-to-day
Yeah.
application of what we're learning into the real world. To sort of wrap us up here,
Yeah.
what sort of, feedback do you get from people at the camp? Whether it is let's think about like the educators. I don't know if there's parent feedback ever, and of course like the volunteers. Like, let's just say the adult feedback specifically from camps. What do you typically hear?
Yeah, I mean, this is amazing. This is so cool. Those kind of things. But I mean, for educators, it's like a lot of times we get some sort of feedback that's like this, that's I cannot believe they learned so much and they had this much fun. Or it's like or specific instances of like I really saw that kid come out of their shell, like I can't believe that they got up and did that, those little moments for like per student aha moments. And then but the overarching one is generally like I can't believe they had this much fun and learned that much and that they did this in 2 days. I mean, they are
Oh,
creating a company with products and selling them and valuing a company in 2 days,
wow.
and so, parents, it's always like parents only come generally at the end to see the commercials and like buy the stuff. And they're always just so
Sure.
impressed that their kid got up there and did it. And, I mean, we're doing this quickly. These aren't Fortune 500 companies. I mean, they're not the most refined products in the world. It's not about
Of
that. It's
course.
about the
No.
activity of doing it.
Yeah.
They don't need to be perfect. I mean, yeah, they do get to, if the product falls apart as soon as the person walks away, they might have to deal with some disgruntled customers, but
Yeah.
it's about just going through the steps.
Big one.
And then, on the corporate side, I mean, the biggest thing that we hear from our volunteers is just like, wow, like I really feel like I made a difference in those young people's lives. I mean, I spent so much time with them. We had conversations. Like, I think this is something that they're going to remember. And I think that's hard, I mean, especially this young, you just never know what kids are going to take away, what they're going to remember. And and I think that's really important for adults to feel like their time is valued, but that they're actually making a difference. That's something we struggle with, like being able to show a long-term impact, but in the short term, like they spend so much time, um, like they really feel it,
Yeah.
Again, it's not the I passed out pins at a fair or I got up and spoke to them for 10 minutes and that's all that happened.
Of
And
course.
again, we do have speakers, but they know that in the room there's other people helping them doing all these things, and so it feels more impactful.
I, I love that. I love that. Lastly, a very last thing, I'm curious, what are their sort of plans to expand this type of camp? What are your hopes? Maybe somebody that's listening, how can they get more involved? Yeah, overarching expansion of camps through corporations.
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for more corporate partners that are interested in excuse me. Yeah, we're always looking for more corporate partners that are interested in bringing an entrepreneurial mindset to young people in their community. When we work with some corporations that are already working with schools, we're happy to do it with that school that they're already working with. Or we can find a school in that area. It doesn't have to be from the corporate sponsor. Most of the time we do find the school, and it's creating a very unique experience for a group of young people that it's much different than any other kind of program that they really get to be part of. So if you're looking to, if you believe that financial literacy and entrepreneurial mindsets or 21st century building 21st century thinkers is important, um, reach out and we're happy to work with you to try to figure out how we could do a corporate camp in your campus.